Hey y'all, it's very nice to see you. If you are watching the recording, which is wonderful, if you do, please skip ahead until the banner in front of you changes. I'm just going to get started and share some links around, and then we will get going. So bear with me while I share some links. I hope everyone is having a really lovely time. If you are able to, you can always share. You can say hello. Yuri is already saying hello. Wonderful. It's really nice to see people. I am trying to create a practice of and then we go from everyone saying hi. That's really nice. If you are waiting and you've been very, very patient while I announced that I would create a live stream, and hours later I finally do. It's because I have done things like fix the build. I tried to muck around with like OBS and tinkered with its settings and got very, very frustrated. Needed to work around with like audio and Linux, which was always good times. And then there was just a bunch of other stuff. And so I was like, oh, you know what? Today I'm going to create a thumbnail properly. And so I did that. And eventually I so welcome everybody who's just started. I'm just going to share some links and let's just see if we can get going. Do hit follow or subscribe. I am trying to get into a practice of Sunday nights hanging out, and let's just do. I should stop talking so that I actually get some things out. You're probably going to hear me typing. And then one more over on Blue Sky. I think Twitter, actually, I'm actually streaming directly to Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, hi there as well. Here we go. And now I finally realize that so if you follow me on Blue Sky, I had this kind of embarrassing but also kind of cute typo, called it a love stream, not a live stream. Maybe that's a reference to the New Zealand accent as well. But okay, ready to go. I will. Okay, I need to figure out how to turn this thing off. One of the reasons why I am slow this morning, this afternoon, this evening, is that I only have a single physical display. And the reason why that's a problem is I like to have the comments up on a second display, and that way I don't leak as much private information. So I'm going to have to kind of do it a little bit harder. So kind of on hard mode, I guess. So I've actually just going to see if I can do it through this way. Ta-da! Hello! It's so nice to see you. We have got the world's worst pixel art editor available already, actually. I implemented it this morning. Here's a compiler error. I wonder what that's about. Oh, no, it's just a breakpoint. What I'm going to do is work through, we'll load it up. And so you get, it's actually pretty awful at the moment. But it works. Like we can kind of create nice things in here. And the intent is for this to be the basis of a few streams. I want to create a wave collapse sort of function, which is a way to procedurally generate repeating tiles that are sort of based on an original tile, as well as some other things, which I think will benefit from having a thing that you can play around with. Now, it's very rudimentary. I have a fixed palette, but the ability to change the background and so forth. My UX, is just it's just the keyboard, and I hope that you will forgive me. And I can save. So there we go. I've saved to pixelart.png. Sorry that it's such an awful screen resolution. The first thing I think that would be worthwhile doing is try to go and share the code that I have so far. And the way that I'll do this is by bringing out, by doing it kind of a slightly weird way, and I will open up the just trying to figure out how to. I'm going to show you the dependencies that I'm using, and then which aren't many. I'm looking forward to cargo script coming through, by the way, which will actually enable you to include the dependencies in a single file project, just so that it can be shared essentially as is. It's not far away, but it's not here yet. The interesting kind of feature of Rust Rover, and I don't mean to pump Rust Rover too much, but they've been very nice to me. They're actually sponsoring the conference that I'm hosting in a couple of months' time, is that it has this interesting functionality where you can just share to the playground in one click. So this is the UX that I have with StreamYard, and here is my posting. Sorry, it's the recursive, but there's the code in the comments. That should, and also I have a GitHub repository. Which is github.com/timclicks/tutorial, and you will find the code that I'll upload a finished version and send it up there. So feel free to start that repository as well if you would like. Okay, so enough like recursive for walls of text. So there's one question, the first question that people come up with is like, well, how are you building this? And I decided to use I suppose an unfashionable tool called MacroQuad. And I say unfashionable because in the game dev community, it's not as well prominent. It's not as prominent as something like a Bevy or one of the other comments. GUI thing is important because it's quite better. Like it's higher production quality. Now that for me is something that you should build. Like, don't take this and then use it naively. Take it and extend it. MacroQuad has a very minimalist vibe, which I quite like. So let me show you how this thing is created. So the whole code lives in this pixel art editor struct. I've got a grid size, and I'm just going to say force people to use squares. So it's pixel. It's the default. So 16 by 16, and we can. And in fact, I could. And then I've got this kind of palette thing. I haven't defined my own palette type. I'm just using a vector of colors. I've kind of arbitrarily used 32, but you can use as many as you want. And here is my screen width and screen height. I'm going to see if I can increase this by 2. Does anyone know why there is a compiler error at this point? So I'm just using 2 times 800 and 2 times 600. And the answer is obvious if you are a Rust programmer, but not very obvious if you are from let's say any other programming language or any dynamically typed language like TypeScript or PHP, Python. The problem is that Rust's numeric literals are also typed. So you can't multiply an integer with a floating point number. It doesn't do automatic promotion, and it won't say, oh, you're using this and you're using this too in the context of like a floating point, and therefore you must mean 2.0. And let's just check if my editor looks a bit bigger. So that's the full screen. And that's not quite what I wanted to do. And the rendering side will need to actually also double. So we've created a, we'll just use this to start with. We'll just finish off with the code with the initialization things. We have a bunch of pixels that we are rendering, which is a multiplication of our grid size. So the grid size is that is our 16 by 16, and everything is sort of anchored off that. If you wanted to, you could also consider that you require, a nice thing to do with these editors is to have a colored boundary in between them, sort of a spacing, so that you can identify exactly what it is that you are rendering. I'll just, and you could also include, you could compensate for that inside this calculation. That's our initialization function. Here's another question for you. Like, what is the difference between the default method in Rust and the new method? I say the convention is to use new as a constructor, or a sort of a pseudo constructor. It's not constructor in the sense that most people normally use for programming languages, but we are defining a static method on the editor type, the struct, that takes a parameter of grid size. When you don't require a parameter, it's conventional to see a different method called default. And, or at least it looks like it's defined in here, but it turns out that it's not. Default also returns self, but it has a slightly different, input set of parameters. It accepts no parameters, and none at all. Whereas grid size accepts one, and the and default is not it lives inside its own struct. So sorry, its own trait. Here's the rest of my code. You can see that I've got default grid size here, but what if I wanted to tell the rest of the type system that I care about defaults for a particular type? Then I would change the code. So I could implement the default trait for pixel art editor, implementing the default struct, and then all of this stuff. I might even create becomes where is it up here? Default grid size. There's the constant. Pixels becomes. That's interesting. I wonder if that will figure itself out shortly. I've got my original palette, and I could sort of move or refactor that construction recreate the constructor for my palette as well into its own little helper function. Now, the reason why I need to use a my own function rather than using the default trait for this default palette is also a question that's worth answering. And the reason why that is that I'm not using a specific type in the type system to represent a palette. It's just a vector. It's a list of a palette, and color comes from macroquad itself. So these are this is quote just a color. Now I can say my and I'll just bring up the someone is it spelling? I wonder. So the that will be worthwhile to figure out, but right now I'm just going to include this other one. So generate default palette. Something is very odd with my setup, and I wonder if I can fix that. So let's go and see what the compiler. Okay. So here's something. I copy and paste the definition of pixel art editor because I'm thinking, I'm defining default, which returns self, which can be whichever type. I then go and use the struct keyword inside there, which kind of turns everything inside out and says that you cannot use types. So I can't use what's happening is that I actually need to return an instance of a type, not a type itself. And being used in the wrong context is now creating a bunch of issues, essentially. The so I'm refactoring this to simplify the code, hopefully, but also provide the ability for us to generate our own grid size. And another fun thing about Rust is that if you use the same variable name as the field name in a struct, you don't need to duplicate that. In fact, your linter will tell you off for it. So we'll just remove. We'll use the shorthand. We also need pixels. So our pixels are the grid itself. So currently we initialize to all zeros, including the alpha channel, and then we have the 2x2 a square matrix of pixels in a single dimensional thing. So this is that's easy too. Now we're kind of sort of maybe mixing concerns at this point. I have a selected color as well as a background color, and is dragging all of and canvas. So these other parameters of the struct relate to user interface or the state of the image itself, which is sort of different than what we want. If you wanted to be purist, so then the question is, well, we need to do all this calculation over here as well. And position. So how do we initialize how wide the thing is going to be? So the canvas is what I'm drawing to as like in macro quad, which I can take all of this out here. Our background color for the user interface is a hard one. Or at least let's see what this is looking at. Say false here. The background color, selected color user. So normally I would put 0, 0, 0, 0. But that won't quite work for our needs. So I'm just going to say that we initialize things as 0, and we'll use that later to generate a series of pixels. Okay, so and this background color is used by our user interface. It's currently extremely ugly, so please make sure that you don't just take the code that I've written and don't take the code that I've written and just naively use it, because it's not very nice, really. Let's see if I can. So here's a question. Why wasn't it a constant to start with? We have we've got a color type. It has a new method. And does anyone know why we're not using it's not quite as easy to use use color as a constant. So let's see if I can get it to code. Missing fields, add missing fields, red, green, blue, alpha. Your own preferences will do a lot of the thinking around like what is stylistically nice. In our case, we have I wonder if I can open it up, a fairly easy struct with 4 fields, which some people like and some people don't. You can, but we probably couldn't use the new method. Oh, no, we can, because it's defined as constant. Okay, so this keyword here, const, allows us to use the new method in a const context. And so I was actually wrong. It is possible to use the new method in this case to generate a constant. Which isn't always the case. If you try to use a new method naively and it hasn't been defined as a constant function, then your then your new method will call. Will fail. Sorry, I'm getting around, getting mixed up with like multiple different things. Okay, so we've got x, y is string. So we have our default method. We don't need a palette variable. We are almost good. There is a kind of sort of, I think that one of the things we should probably do is clean up the screen handling. At the moment, we have kind of a yuck fixed screen. What we can do is scale the rendering. And at this point, you think, well, why would you bother with a new and a default? So you can do We start with editor, and then we do editor.gridsize, and we update it. There's actually there is an argument to say that this is kind of a horrible thing to do, and so one advantage of implementing default is that you have you have something else to do when unwrap is called. So when types implement default, your code gains access to a family of new methods that are related to unwrap. Normally there's unwrap and expect, or unwrap underscore or, which provides you with the ability to provide a closure. When your type implements default, you get another set of methods, which is unwrap or default. So I'll just check, just see if we can show you one other way of initializing this. You could use mutation of individual fields in here. We don't need a return keyword because we're Rust. Pixel editor. We can do grid size and then dot default. I'm going to get the syntax wrong here. But, and so it's like, what the heck is this? This sorry, so the period or full stop syntax says to Rust, for all of the other fields, just rely on the default method for this type, which is kind of what we want. And now we have so-called, now we have a purity thing. The resizing is more straightforward than I would probably like. We start by initializing a brand new grid of a different size, a grid of pixels, then we copy across the old pixels and then replace them as we go. The translation here of y times grid size plus x is the way to translate from x and y going through loops, and then noting that they're actually stored in a one-dimensional grid. And so y can be thought of as, each column is stored one after each other, and then x is the item with inside the specific column, but the overall representation for all of our pixels is a flat one-dimensional array, or vector in this case. We then update our pixels and update our grid size. And you might wonder about what if, if you are a defensive programmer, one of the questions you might ask is, oh gosh, is there a so I've got this kind of ugly statement like, well, what if you were a malicious C++ programmer or Java programmer? Let's stay away from threatening C++. C++ people get a bit defensive when I start getting angry at them. But what about if you have a race condition where you're updating self.pixels and then someone comes and accesses the field, or even up here? What if you are attempting to update? We're not mutating self. We could. But what about if there's a race condition between these two updates? For some nefarious reason, we have time sleep, and actually, I'm going to get this wrong. Oh, there is a way to just sleep, and there we go. It's inside the standing thread. So I'm sleeping for 100 milliseconds. So there's plenty of time for some other thread to go and modify things. It's like, wait, we're talking about Rust. Rust will not allow any other parts of the code to access the self variable, self.pixels, while the grid is being resized. So from a conceptual point of view, there's sort of a lock being applied to self that is restricted in the context of this method, and only the method is allowed write access to that data. And you're thinking, well, how is that able to be implemented if there are no actual locks? The way that this works is Rust does it at compile time and verifies that you do not have access into the same data at the same time. That's the sort of the whole point of why Rust exists. And it's able to provide guarantees like there will not be race conditions if you modify multiple fields in the same method. You don't require an explicit lock. That's how it works. There is a something else that's happening here. So welcome, by the way, to everyone else who has joined us. I need to show you what this thing looks like that we're building. We have the world's kind of tiniest, worst pixel art editor. We're trying to use the most basic thing possible, and the code already exists. So if you scroll back to in the comments, you'll actually find this kind of workable but clunky thing. Yeah, the code for it is already in the playground, and you've probably got bored about me explaining all of these intricacies about Rust. So, I guess the bit of a rug pull on you is that I'm spending far less time talking about pixel art than I am spending talking about Rust, the language. And that's fairly intentional, actually. I like to tinker with creative projects, and I use them to teach myself software, but I'm much more knowledgeable about Rust, the programming language, than I am about the intricacies of this sort of thing. So all I need to do to save a PNG is push S, and to increase the size of the grid, I push plus. To make it smaller, I push minus. Now, sorry that it's so small. I think that is the next, and I'm sorry, we've got this, it's all wrong. That's slightly intentional because I want you to take this project and extend it and improve it and then share it again. We can work on this together, and you can do that in a couple of different ways. One of them is to, oh gosh, where did it go? You can do this in multiple different ways. We could, you can submit a PR with your implementation to the tutorials website. You can also join me on Discord, or just find me on social media. I'm there, and I'm very happy to find I'm very, very happy to take your projects and we'll see if we can create a collection of updates to it. Okay, right. So this is how we draw the palette. And if we wanted to, this is where you would start to add some extra, you would start to take into account the canvas size. So at the moment, it's essentially scale invariant. That is, I've got a canvas X and a canvas Y. This is it relates to the screen width and the screen height. However, we don't include screen width and screen height into the calculation of any of this rendering. This isn't hard to do. We need to update the X by we need to have a scale if we wanted to change it. Oh gosh, and we need to maintain the aspect ratio. So one of the things that I could do here would be aspect ratio. Aspect ratio is probably something that actually I might define as. I might actually pull the screen width and screen height into the definition of our struct. After that, we can update all of this business. It's arguable that, let me just double check what what I need. So draw grid, draw palette, draw UI. So no, wait. Clear background. Okay. So that's different. That is part of macro quad. So it's using OpenGL calls. So that's not as useful to me as I would like. Okay, let's try and see if I can draw a grid. And yeah, we just need to have an aspect ratio which is related to this. Actually, I'm going to change my plan already. Sorry about this. I'm going to create a function, aspect ratio. And that is going to take self by reference, which means I'm going to access these fields internally with read-only access, and I'm going to return back a floating point number, and that is going to be self x, canvas x by canvas y. And why is it unhappy with me? Method attribution. Oh, okay, so I'm in the wrong place. It's not part of the default trait. It's part of the editor. I don't need those two now. Sometimes it's hard to remember exactly X's and Y's. So there's the window that the user has provided. There's the the operating system has provided with the application. So its boundaries. There's also the physical screen, or at least what the operating system tells the application that the screen width is and the screen height is. Then there is some conversion that the various things. So sorry that I mucked that all up. Okay, now we need to modify the size of X and Y by some sort of scale, and the and I'm going to try and say, we'll start by duplicating 2.0. There'll be a better way to do this, and I'm sure that many of you will think about it. Let's just see what happens if I think, you know what? I really want to I really want to increase the size of this little thing. Where the little thing is, at the moment, I've got these kind of slightly horrible, oh gosh, and now everything is broken. So we're trying to make this bigger than 800 by 600. And you'll find that as you go, you're going to make mistakes. And so this is kind of like let's call it a happy little accident. It's not particularly happy because it turns out that the input handling is still using the old grid. It's just the rendering of the pixels that is coming up in the new place. What happens if I maximize? Oh no, it doesn't change it at all. Okay, so the what else can I teach you? We can talk about how input works in the inside the macrocode framework. First of all, I need to know its position. So macrocode exports this mouse position, a function, and if we've been pressed, then I need to translate the location of the mouse to the location on the palette, or on the, so there's, macrocode is much more minimalistic. We're essentially rendering our own UI using very basic elements. So we can't ask the framework, has a widget been clicked? Or at least we haven't written that code. Instead, what we're doing is we've got raw coordinates, and then we just map them to the locations that we had already generated. And so if we try to modify the rendering, which is what I did with the aspect ratio, then we also need to include a modification in the handling of the inputs. So over here, I'm checking if we're inside the palette, and X and Y also needs to be modified. So the other thing that might need to happen, so let's just try if I can fix this bug in some ways, although and what I want to be able to do, oh look, so now we're actually, this will be very, very hard for you to see, unfortunately, because it's a tiny screen. But what I can now do is demonstrate that there is a distinction between these UI changes and handling of them. We need to be able to think about where the cursor is, where the screen is, and where the pixels are all together at the same time. Okay, so the question might be, well, we also need to increase the palette cell size. So the palette cell size also needs to be modified by this ratio, or sort of like the scale. I'm just going to use a variable here, although it's not strictly, I mean, it is it doesn't change, but it is a variable. And the cell size, palette size, and I'm going to try multiplying it by scale. And now cell size over here needs to change. I don't think that I don't think I need to modify. I think I don't need, oh gosh, I can't remember my mathematics. Multiplication isn't, I don't think that I need to modify aspect ratio because it's the ratio. Let's see what happens here. What I want now is bigger rectangles. Aha, what I have is more space between rectangles. So that's not quite as useful. Aha, so I need to change cell size. This too is a border width. Cell size, and I want to do, let's say that we want to make it cell size like 1/10, or let's say 1/15, and potentially, but we want a minimum size, of 2. One of the other weird things about Rust is that floating point and integer literals actually support the ability for you to call methods on them. So you could think of, if we added parentheses, that we have a 2.0 and then we are calling a min function, which is probably exported in multiple languages as a function that takes 2 numeric values. In Rust, that min function looks like a method call, and the parser accepts this slightly odd looking double dot syntax, which doesn't look particularly natural if you haven't seen it before. And should this be max? Indeed, it should be max. Yes, it should be max. Oh gosh. Now it's sort of slightly confused because it needs to have a yeah, so this is an interesting one from, so if you see this method, call max on an ambiguous numeric type, float, this is some of the compiler's internals bubbling up to you. What's happening is that the compiler sees a floating point number and hasn't allocated a concrete type at the time that it is then trying to resolve which method to invoke. And so each floating point type, of which there are 2, float F32 and F64, have their own implementations of what max means. And it's asking you to choose. So we're getting closer, not really. Well, maybe we're getting closer to being able to have this scale independent. What's happening now is I've only got the border is being rendered, it isn't being expanded. So I'm going to change that to 10. And there is the rectangle size lines are over here. So this cell size needs to change. And then I need the border width as well. Interestingly, you get to choose whether or not you render 2 rectangles and you shift one such that you can build the you could build 2 rectangles and then have the border always rendered and then have another one sort of on top. Or what we're doing is drawing lines outside of the edge. Now, the problem that we've got is that the thickness actually needs to be taken into account here. So this is the width. Now, the other point, remember, as you make the modifications, is that your user interface code also needs to update. When you go and modify this and to make it more to your liking, you'll find yourself having to like muck around a lot trying to figure out exactly where the cursor is and so forth. At some point you'll figure, hey, actually I want a real UI toolkit to write all of this stuff, and you'll kind of outgrow the library. And so let's go back to cargo run again, and is mouse press. Palette cell size is now different than the default. And at this point, you start thinking, gosh, have I done something wrong? These are we'll do the background stuff next, I think. What we might now do next will be to create pretty soon, would be to create methods which dynamically return the cell size based on some parameter, which you're kind of also identifying. We can also potentially take the scale. Anyway, we can do this dynamically. We don't need to right now, but what am I thinking about? Up here, cell size doesn't exist. And so, gosh, what is that? And the and well, what is scale? Well, scale is some parameter which we haven't actually used properly. And we're dirtying up our code horribly. I hope you'll forgive me. Wait a minute. I don't think this is going to do what I want it to do, but we may as well figure out and work together. Okay, so at least our updates are working. And I've still got the ability to render on screen. And if I go and push S, you know what I should do is I should actually have like the Tim Clicks logo, like as the default image. Of course, that's the thing that should happen, but it's not. I will just see if I can exit presentation mode. And there's pixelart.png, and it's rendering. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to go back and just check in with people and see whether or not there's any more code that you would like me to expand upon. If you have just joined us, awesome to see you. Please please click follow and subscribe and so forth. The easiest place to get notified of new things like this would be YouTube. So it's youtube.com/timclicks. And I'll try to put a banner up so that if we can find it. But in the interim, there is the GitHub repository for the code that will be generated. And there are also links to how to follow me on YouTube, Twitch, X, Blue Sky, and also my Discord server for like interacting and like following up. So if you want to share your code, really, really interested to see where you take this. And there are lots of possibilities because there's no need for it to be square. There's no need for you to have like a fixed palette in the way that I've done it. You could, for example, implement a keyboard which will, sorry, a key, one thing that would be fun to implement would be to have the ability to select a color and then push like a key. It might be D for darken or L for lighten or something, and it will go and like find you a nice color inside a range that automatically lightens things up so that you can have shading, for example. Your palette could also be dynamically generated based on the colors that are already in already in the game, sorry, already in the image. Which reminds me of another tutorial that I gave a while ago, which took a high resolution image and compressed it down to something that's much more pixelated. And so you could also incorporate that code too. It's been nearly an hour. I've enjoyed this. Sorry that it's been a little bit rocky in places. But there is a yeah, it's been a little bit rocky, but also I think that it's been fun to be able to provide you with some working code. I will see you online. And again, so we're trying to do this Sunday afternoons and some Sunday evenings, depending where you are in the world. And with that, my name is Tim Clicks. I'm on the planets to build a better planet. And I will say goodbye. So thank you so much for hanging out.